when we're recording this, just probably about a month and a half ago, ChatGPT was everywhere. And,
Yep.
and I think, and I don't know, like where it was. Maybe it wrote the book for you. Who knows, right? Maybe that's why it got out. Right?
We'll never know, will we?
Never know, right? And one of the things that I've started to do is I've actually started to utilize it in my own learning to figure it out from the viewpoint of a learner, so then I could give effective strategies to talk about teaching. What I'm watching is a lot of people saying, here's a project, here's a thing. And I'm like, how do you know that? How do you know this? Right. And I think a lot of times we jump straight to the teaching without doing the learning. For example, I
Mm,
wrote a blog post yesterday and I talked about the book, The Four Agreements. Now I read the entire book and I, I, I read the entire book but then I actually said, and so I asked ChatGPT to summarize what the four agreements are and provide me a quote. So I
how'd it do?
actually say that in my blog post, and it was bang on, right? And then I use it just like I would say, this is from Wikipedia, this is from this website. I just said this is from ChatGPT. So I didn't pretend something else. It,
Right.
but then I actually took my own context and and then shared things that ChatGPT wouldn't know because they're not George stories, right? Like I can't say tell George Couros stories. So
Right.
like how did I actually take my learning from and combine it as opposed to replace it, right? And I think that's what's going to separate what we do in education with this. Is it something that ChatGPT could is an assignment that ChatGPT could just answer for you, or is it something that we could utilize it, but you still have to get that human element, that real, the
For
empathetic
sure. Yeah.
storytelling? So, how do you see the ChatGPT and its use, the connection to what you talk about in your book?
That's a great question. And so one of my chapters is called Relationships versus Robots, right? And I talk about the importance of relationships as teachers, as the human element, and also talk about the importance of technology and its role in education as well. I point out that there are advantages and pros and cons to both. And if there really is a foreseeable future where robots or computers could overtake teachers. And at the end of the chapter, giveaway, spoiler alert, I talk about shifting that question to think about rather than relationships versus robots, how can we think of it as relationships with robots, right?
Mhm.
Technology is so ubiquitous and accessible these days that we have to use it in order to use our learning to amplify it and make it better, right? And so, how can we have those relationships with technology so that we can use it in more powerful ways to really help to accelerate our learning as opposed to not using it, right? And so there's always something that will be the next best thing that comes along that really pauses us and really makes us question technology use, right? Before it was the pen, this will be permanent, we won't be able to erase it, right? Jumping all the way to now. We can't foresee what these next technological advances will be, but I think we have to have the attitude and the approach to learning with it and thinking about how we can use it to promote good in the world and
Mhm.
what should we be cautious about in terms of potential downfalls that it could create. If we have those attitudes, I think it'll be really helpful for us to navigate some of these really difficult decisions that schools face about whether or not to include it,
Mhm.
whether or not to block it, or should we just put more energy into working with students to teach them to make better digital decisions when using these types of technologies.
Yeah, like when you're talking about this, the analogy that I think about, and I don't know if you remember Khan Academy, right? I
Oh
don't even know if
yeah,
they'll use it, right? So when Khan Academy first came out,
it's a great
people were like,
example.
oh my god, like we're gonna become. Some people were like terrified this is gonna replace teachers. I
Yep.
never had that concern ever,
Right.
and my argument was like, if that's the way you teach, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But I don't teach like that. There's an element of that. And so, was there a benefit in Khan Academy? And I'm sure people still use it as a supplemental resource.
Exactly.
Of
Yep.
course, it is. Right. And that's the same way I'm looking at ChatGPT. It's not a replacement, but unless we act in the way that we would use it as a replacement. So, how do you make that a supplemental resource versus this? Because I was never, there was not one day where I was worried that Khan Academy was going to replace what I was doing, just the
Right.
same way I'm not worried about ChatGPT, but I am going to use those things and I am
For
going to see
sure.
the benefit and I'm going to leverage them to do things that actually, I know this sounds weird, that actually need less thinking, right? Like how am I going
Yeah.
to use those things that do less thinking to connect?
Automation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that analogy.